Hello, everyone. Welcome to our special program, which we're calling Reality Check, the State of Human Trafficking in Atlanta. My name is Cannon Carr. I'm president of the Rotary Club of Atlanta, and our club is honored to be hosting this special event. Before I turn it over to our distinguished panel, who are really the experts in this area, I thought I'd just take 2 minutes to put in context why this issue is so important to our club and prepare us for the conversation coming with us today. About 7 to 8 years ago, our club really began to get engaged in fighting the scourge that faces the city of Atlanta and many other cities in our nation. Then, at the time, U.S. Attorney Sally Yates, U.S. Attorney for North Georgia, made a presentation to our club that really focused on the underside of Atlanta and how human trafficking was affecting our city and the teens and the families in it. That really awakened our club. And through the years since that time, we've been engaged in many projects. One in particular early on, many of our club members got involved to secure the buildings for something called Covenant House, which is focused on homeless teens. And we've been involved many years with that great organization. In fact, just tomorrow night, we are having our annual executive sleep out that one of our club members, David Lewis, is chairing this year. And it's a fundraiser and awareness creator to basically symbolically say we stand alongside the homeless teens that are in our city. And it's a fabulous, successful event. As well, many of our members have traveled nationally as advocates to create awareness on this event. As a final point, I want to say that about 3 years ago, our club redoubled its efforts on where we thought we could have the biggest impact. And that biggest impact is in the corporate community of Atlanta. So we began to reach out to businesses of the city to see how can we shepherd our resources to really attack this issue. And this is where we thought we could have the biggest impact. And what we did at that time was we formed a task force to fight human trafficking. And we asked Ted Blum, one of our members, to chair it. Ted, who I'll focus on in just a minute, is managing director of Greenberg-Traurig and has just done a phenomenal job leading this task force. And what I'd like to do here now is let me bring up a graphic that will introduce some of the key partners that have been involved over the last 3 years in this effort. These are key stakeholders. Let me say there are many others as well that have been involved. We want to say thank you to them. But this task force against human trafficking that our club has spearheaded is led by Ted Blum. And you can see we have about 15 or 20 club members actively involved. I'm proud to be on that committee as well as many of our other club leaders. And also I want to point out just on the right side of this page, some other great Rotarians that have been involved as well. Dave McClary, who's with the Rotary Club of Roswell, is chair of Rotary International's Anti-Slavery Action Group, and has just done some amazing work here. I also want to point out that we've worked closely with the First Lady of Georgia, Marty Kemp, who commissioned formed the Grace Commission, and many of our clubs serve on that. And I'll also point out just some key milestone events that have helped us build momentum over the last 3 years in this effort. In 2018, under Ted's leadership and our task force, we held a CEO breakfast that was hosted by Delta CEO Ed Bastian and helped unite and mobilize many of the city businesses in our city. And also in 2019, when we hosted the Super Bowl as a city, many of the organizers of the Super Bowl created a big campaign to create awareness about human trafficking. So in this context, I want to welcome Ted Blum to the stage, who is going to give us an update on the progress in our fight on human trafficking. So Ted, when you can come up to the stage, that would be great. There we go. All right, it looks like we may be having a moment of technical difficulty. But while Ted is coming up, so Ted has been a long-time member of our club and is managing director of Greenberg-Traurig, and has spent countless hours and effort in spearheading this initiative. If we are having technical difficulty, what I might do is I'll go ahead, and I know Ted had some prepared remarks, and when he can join us, that'll be great. But why don't I go ahead and bring up to the stage our panelists, and I can have them maybe introduce themselves and we can go from there. Great. Welcome to see. Happy to see you guys. This is great. So if you could maybe just go in the order you are on the top to bottom on the screen, maybe just take a moment to introduce yourselves and we can get started.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Renea Green, and I am a special agent with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and I'm currently assigned to GBI's HEAT unit, which is our Human Exploitation and Trafficking unit, where we are focused on adult sex trafficking. We also have another unit within the GBI called our Child Exploitation and Computer Crimes unit, and they will work juvenile sex trafficking cases.
Great. Thank you, Agent Green.
And I am Sergeant Britton, Ernest Britton with the Atlanta Police Department. I supervise our Child Exploitation and Online Protection Squad. The unit investigates both adult and child human trafficking, both sex and labor, as well as any online activity, solicitation of minors on the internet.
Great. Thank you, Sergeant Britton. And then our other panelists, and then we'll turn to Ted.
Hi, I'm Supervisory Special Agent Keith Kabrhel with the FBI in Atlanta. I am the supervisor over the Violent Crimes Against Children Human Trafficking Unit for the Bureau in Atlanta. That unit oversees and coordinates the MATCH Task Force, which is the Metro Atlanta Child Exploitation Task Force, that we have numerous local law enforcement partners to include Atlanta Police, GBI, and several large counties surrounding the Atlanta Metro.
Great. Well, I want to welcome just personally our three panelists here, just experts in law enforcement, and certainly are going to bring a lot of intelligence to this conversation. Ted, glad to have you back. Let me turn it back over to you. And I know you had some prepared remarks, and our panelists are introduced, and so you can take it from there.
Well, first of all, like all things in football and life, you have to be prepared to call audibles and do things differently as things proceed. First, I would like to have been together in person, all of us, but then we wouldn't have so many distinguished guests from around the world. And I'm glad, though, anyway, we're able to convene virtually. And I'm sorry my computer went down, but I want to tell you before we get into the questions, the angle that we're coming at this is a partnership with law enforcement and the business community and Rotary Club of Atlanta, the Rotary Clubs throughout Georgia and throughout the country and throughout the world, and Rotary International wanted to bring a partnership to the enforcement efforts that our panelists are so actively involved in. And it's our responsibility as business leaders and as civic leaders to bring our strengths and our attention and our vigilance to this fight, because our panelists and their organizations, fight as they might, can't do it all on their own. And so our efforts have been to work in partnership with this group. So this group is great, and they're here to bring different perspectives, but I want to start off by just telling you a little bit that we can make a difference as well, and they'll approach this when we open our eyes and pay attention to the problems that are out there. My law firm, Greenberg Traurig, which I head the Atlanta office of, have tried to approach this as a business, coming at it from both the perspective of stopping the demand, educating our workforce, and also working with survivors to help them get back on their feet and get employment opportunities and help make their way into this. Other businesses have joined this effort. Many businesses have signed up, educated their workforce, millions of employees, to understand and be aware of the problem. But the problem is large. So let's jump into it. If I can ask Agent Green, Agent Kabrhel, and Sergeant Britton to just jump in and respond however you want. I want to first start locally in Atlanta. And I want to kind of get a feel for your perspectives on Atlanta, because Atlanta has been unfortunately considered and distinguished, a dubious distinction, as a substantial hub of sexual trafficking. And we want to fight that and stop it. So How do you view the Atlanta effort to fight human trafficking? As you've heard about different ways in which Atlanta has come together, how do you view the efforts from an enforcement standpoint?
I'll let the others go first on that one, and then I'll end that one. Renee, if you would like to answer that one first.
So I think we've done a really good job with educating the public. Also with GBI, we've taken a huge initiative in trying to educate law enforcement over the past couple of years in the areas of exactly what is trafficking and the myths and misconceptions around trafficking. We are kind of at an angle a little above where Britain is at, in the fact that when the GBI is typically involved, we're kind of like a liaison or a bridge for a lot of different jurisdictions. So we're able to come in and assist on cases that may cross those jurisdictional boundaries. I think with the education component, we've done a better job over the last couple of years in bridging some of those gaps, and at least putting out there, who to call or what you need to do if you see human trafficking.
What about from the FBI's perspective?
Sure. So the Bureau runs national initiatives to combat sex trafficking. And some of those national initiatives obviously take place, and we affect those in Atlanta. The numbers in Atlanta, and one of the reasons that from a national perspective, Atlanta looks like such a hub of human trafficking. One, we do have a human trafficking issue in Atlanta, but also it looks that way because we're very effective at combating sex trafficking in Atlanta. Other cities that are like size with Atlanta, even large cities larger than Atlanta, don't have the law enforcement presence and cooperation to really affect the crime problem. When you affect the crime problem, you have the statistical accomplishments and the reporting mechanisms of what that crime problem looks like. In cities that aren't addressing it as well, it doesn't look like the problem exists as much because law enforcement isn't reporting it. We happen to have the largest federal task force to combat human trafficking in the country, and I would say the most effective. The partnerships that we have with APD and Fulton County and Cobb County, DeKalb County, the GBI are second to none in the United States as far as the federal and local and state cooperation. And so the coverage that we have here in Atlanta is very good. That doesn't mean that the crime problem doesn't exist and will continue to exist, but the addressing the problem here, I think, is going better than in other cities that's similar to Atlanta. And the way that we look at it from the federal perspective is that we need our local partners for that, not only in the law enforcement arena, but in the business arena, as well as the non-government organization arena. And all of those pieces in Atlanta work well together, which makes us successful here.
And to piggyback all of that is, as Keith said, we've got started very early on attacking this issue. We had government officials that saw a need to address it. We partnered with everyone that we could reach out to. This is not an issue for just law enforcement by themselves. We need the public, we need other agencies, we need other law enforcement. We have all built a collaboration that I've not seen or heard from anywhere else in the country. We all have each other's telephone numbers. We can all talk. We share information. There's none of this some other units and other squads who wants to keep the information. We talk with the public. The public works with us. They share that information. So when you have that much communication and that much cooperation, yes, you have that also much more reporting. So it comes across as if Atlanta has the largest problem, where we're just addressing an issue that appears in many other cities our size, but we have a lot of mechanisms to both help survivors and to punish those exploiters. So I think all of this working together has given us that spotlight that others don't have right now.
Well, that's really key. I'm trying to move out of the light. That's really key because as we fight this, it's much more critical that we collaborate and use our advanced statistics and experience to work together, even if that might mean that the numbers may not be winning numbers as we want them to be. But I guess I'd like to understand a little more about how you collaborate and how you approach this problem so effectively at so many different levels, even though the problem just keeps growing.
I can start with that one if that's all right with you guys.
Mhm.
So from a task force perspective, the Bureau received information all the time about human trafficking victims. There's the national hotline that sends information about human trafficking victims to Atlanta. So if someone, say a hotel owner, recognizes that there is a child who looks, or a person looks to be 16, 17 years old and may be a human trafficking victim, they send that information to the national center. They'll call into the 800 number. That information then gets passed in a report down to the FBI as the liaison in Georgia for that information. In the emails that are received from that human trafficking tip line, the FBI, the GBI, and HSI all receive those reports. It's determined who has really the best jurisdiction, or who is the best to handle that particular complaint. If, say, for instance, that comes to Atlanta and it's something that the FBI is going to handle, and that's located in an area of Atlanta that Atlanta Police Department handles, we then pass that information to the Atlanta Police Department so that they can send a patrol unit to do a welfare check on that hotel room and determine if that is a true complaint, or if that person, if it's something other than a true complaint. If it's a true complaint, then the human trafficking investigators get involved to kick off helping that victim, as well as trying to establish if there's enough evidence to bring charges against a trafficker. And so that can all happen very quickly. Without the coordination and collaboration between the departments, the lift for the number of complaints that we get would just be impossible for the Bureau to handle by itself. And so we not only can do that in Atlanta, but we can do it around the entire metro, as well as HSI will handle anything that has an international human trafficking perspective. And then GBI handles a lot of the other areas of the state that they have a good reach into with their contacts and other local law enforcement. That's really just one of the ways that we coordinate and collaborate in this type of investigation.
Yeah, and also a scenario like that on the local level that we'll have, meaning we have close ties with our Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. So if someone goes in Hugh Spalding and the nurses have some concern about who the child is with, or they have a series of questions that they ask, if the level is raised that they need to notify us, they will call us directly. We have ties with the security directors of hotels around the Atlanta area. So again, if they have some concern, they know where to call directly. So we have several input streams of information and intelligence to us that we are able to quickly respond to because we have such close ties to the community at large.
So from the state side, I'll piggyback kind of off what Special Agent Kabrhel had said. So with GBI, we run the GBI's Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, much like the FBI. We actually have an agent permanently assigned to FBI's Match Task Force. But the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force is made up of over 200 local departments throughout the state. So that gives us the ability that when these cases come in, if it's in an area where we don't have an agent necessarily assigned that would cover that area, and we want to start on a local department, we're able to go to that task force and see what jurisdiction would cover that and reach out directly to them and have a person that is trained in working child exploitation as well as sex trafficking investigations versus just kind of blindly picking up a phone and hoping to get someone that's helpful on the other end. We actually have a network of people out there throughout the state that we can reach out to.
So we're all living in the world of technology, and sometimes technology works, sometimes it doesn't, and we saw with my computer how it failed. But in the fight against trafficking, how are you utilizing technology, and what do you see as the future opportunities to utilize technology even a little more? I mean, you mentioned, for example, that if a child comes to Hughes Spalding, that they can inform you of something that's suspicious or a problem. And Delta's flight attendants are doing a fabulous job of raising awareness, and UPS's truckers and other companies are doing a great job of raising awareness. But what about technology? How does first, let me break it down. How is technology used by the traffickers?
Oh, now that, yes. Now, because of COVID and a lot of lockdown, they have accelerated, at least from what we've been able to see, their use of technology. They've always been on social media. They've done their recruiting there. They're able to now create virtual rooms so that they can communicate and chat with each other. So they're using it a lot of different ways. They're like with a lot of folks, because clubs and other things have shut down, they are moving to using Airbnbs to host. So we're seeing a lot of that. They're utilizing Uber now to do more of the transport, where before they would just rely on the taxis, but now they are using Lyft and Uber and other private means to move people around. So they are firmly into using the technology that's available to them.
Right. From the perspective of the investigation, though, that although it makes their life easier, as all technology would for any job, whether it's illicit or not, it leaves a data trail that investigators can use in order to piece together enough evidence to bring charges. So, for instance, when a bad guy or trafficker posts an advertisement on a web app or a website for a particular trafficking victim, then we have the ability to capture that and keep that. And if that victim shows up again in another state, we have the ability to say, okay, we know that this particular subject and trafficker has traveled with this person, minor or adult, from one state to another in order to commit this crime, which creates interstate nexus from a federal perspective. And it gives us a history of how long the trafficking has happened. And so we have different technologies that help us to track certain websites and how much trafficking is occurring on those sites. We have in the past federally have gotten Congress to shut down certain websites as being because the way that they're operated and they're only used for illicit reasons, as well as we've seized certain websites like Backpage.com that are only used for illicit reasons. Unfortunately, bad guys are going to try to continue to make their money and commit their crimes, and so they find ways to get around that, and which is sometimes using servers that are outside the United States that are out of our control and things like that. So the ever-changing landscape of technology and trafficking and criminal activity in the year 2020 is something that's always a challenge for the Bureau and for law enforcement in general, and is something we're always trying to keep up with the traffickers, because they move quickly through the applications and that are being developed and the latest that people are using on a regular basis. And we're always following with our investigation to try to figure out what they're doing.
So I would say that, technology is a double-edged sword. As you've heard, it definitely helps us in making these cases and proving the trafficking. It also gives us an avenue of where to go if we're looking for a particular trafficking victim or have the indicators that an individual is being trafficked. We know different websites that we can go out there and use. But again, it also makes it harder because as the technology changes, and now we're starting to deal with some encryption issues on different platforms, that makes it a little bit harder. And law enforcement's always a step or two behind the game. And so depending upon the platform or the sites that this exploitation is occurring, it can be beneficial or it can be hurtful at the same time.
So I wanna ask Agent Kabrhel a follow-up question, and then I want to turn it over to each of you. But given the rapid changes to technology and the increased use of technology, while still knowing that it creates a roadmap for following the traces of people's trails, how do you, with your limited resources, how do you police all of this, and how do you deploy resources in a way that just doesn't overwhelm you, but in a way that can continue to progress in the fight?
Well, I think that the actual answer to that is one step at a time, one application at a time. The one thing that the FBI has is that we are, the Atlanta division is just one division of 56 in the United States, and then we have over 200 offices around the world. And one of the major powers the Bureau has, so to speak, is the cooperation we have nationally and internationally with local law enforcement, which is a force multiplier for everything we do from a law enforcement perspective. We have an initiative in the FBI to better ourselves when it comes to cyber investigations, and that has everything to do with human trafficking that happens online, but gets is the Bureau has enough technical resources to investigate intrusions from other countries, and so we leverage the abilities that we have in all types of investigations in order to use those skills in things like human trafficking investigations. And so that gives us the ability to be more nimble, to say, how did we approach the investigation into this high level cyber actor, and how can we use what we did there to leverage that against this particular website or what these bad guys are doing within this application. And the breadth and depth of knowledge that we have within the FBI and with our partners in law enforcement really gives us that ability. That's really the only way to answer it. The question about changes in technologies and how quickly they move is just, you have to see what's happening and figure out how to do it one step at a time, because every application, every investigation works differently. And the coordination between us and our partners is how we accomplish that.
Agent Green, are you seeing a similar reality?
Yes, very much so. Technology is changing every day, and with that comes new apps and new sites and new ways of doing business.
What about you, Sergeant Britton? Are you where does it play out in the police department?
The same for everyone. Budgets are tight. We don't have the same flexibility as some of the people we're going after. So that's where our collaborations and leveraging expertise comes in. We're constantly sharing information. We're constantly updating that information. As we discover something new, we try and pass it along to everyone else on the team, so that we all can come up with ways to either navigate, to make successful investigations. So there was a time where, when I first came on, we would have criminals doing the same thing for months on end, and we would use the same technique to capture them. In today's scenarios, as soon as we come up with a means to solve a problem, they've created a new scenario that makes that technique obsolete. So we have to constantly evolve. So the same way I handled an investigation this month will not be the same I handle the investigation next month. So that's part of what keeps our team so close, is because we have to share. For us to be successful, we have to share the information, and we have to know how the environment is changing daily.
So I mean, from my standpoint, it seems like it's a daunting, never-ending task where you have to constantly keep up and expand and anticipate. What can those of us who are not in enforcement, but who are in business or in the community organizations, what can we do to give you greater insight into what's going on and to just help in any way we can help?
Well, at least for us, at least especially locally, is to be aware, provide us information, let us know what you see. A lot of this may seem innocent, and I understand people are always concerned that, okay, maybe I'm just overreacting, maybe I'm doing a little bit too much, but we would rather you do too much than too little. There's a lot of things at stake. There are people's lives. And so our main focus is to rescue and help those being victimized. That's our first step. Then the next step will be for us to step in and try and prosecute those that are harming the innocent and the vulnerable. So we need people to be aware. We need people to keep an eye out, even in just everyday out to restaurants, just your everyday. We're not saying be overly paranoid, but if something just doesn't look right, if a situation looks just not kosher, call. Let us at least just take a look. That's one of the biggest things that has helped change things. I know we talk about technology, but old policing, just talking to people still works.
Yeah.
It's amazing how it does. So we never forget that human element on our investigations.
Well, that's really interesting. That speaks to me because the more things change, the more old school human interactions need to play a role. So sticking with you, Sergeant Britton, so what do we do? So we see something that doesn't look kosher. We're at a restaurant. Walk me through, if you don't mind, and all of us online, walk us through what we should do as citizens.
Well, there are several avenues. As Keith Kabrhel, FBI explained, there's the hotline, human tip hotline that you can use. Now that's more of a national type thing, and that takes a while. Atlanta does have both the non-emergency number and a 911. So if we're talking about something inside the city, then yeah, just call, let them know what you see, what's going on, give as much information as you can, and then we will take that from there. Now, or you can call our Crime Stoppers tip if you have a situation in your neighborhood or something at a house that just doesn't seem right, then we can follow up on that as well. So those are just those three separate avenues from the city of Atlanta standpoint. And with that being done, if you want us to get in touch with you, then we will call back, we will touch bases. Now, as we try to tell folks, depending on the sensitivity of the information you provide and what it entails, we may not can tell you everything. I understand people want to know the outcome, and we can give you outcomes, but we can't give you full step-by-step, this is what's going on at this point, just because of the nature of our investigation. But once you've made that contact, we will follow up. We follow up on everything. And if it's not something that needs to be followed up by APD, then I will get in touch with FBI or GBI if they need to follow up, if they would be the best source for that follow-up. So that's just, those are three right there off the bat. Our Crime Stoppers has an online component, so you can submit something by email. So we try to make it as convenient as possible for information to come to us from the public.
So Agent Green, that kind of lays out what we citizens ought to be doing in Atlanta. What about on a broader state basis in Georgia?
So I think one of the easiest ways that you can report if you're not in Metro Atlanta is there's the See Something, Send Something app. that's free. Everybody can download, and that way, if you don't know maybe what area or who to call, everybody's got their smartphones these days. You just get out your smartphone and you text to that app exactly what it is that you're seeing, and kind of like what Sergeant Britton had said. It's our people that are out there every day that are interacting with the public. You're going to be the ones that encounter these human trafficking victims. You're going to be the ones that see something and say, you know, something's just not right. You may not know what it is, but you can just tell that something is not right. And I know a lot of people don't want to call a non-emergency number or call 911 because they're afraid that they're going to be wasting law enforcement's time if it turns out not to be something. But if it's real easy just to send something on that app and then let law enforcement follow up with it from there.
So Agent Kabrhel, are you, I mean, I don't want to ask you exactly the same question, but I think it's worthy because looking at it from not just a local perspective, but from a federal perspective, what is it citizens can do?
So I'm going to take a little bit of a different path and kind of answer your question part A that you asked, Sergeant Britton. From my perspective, my previous life was in the private sector, working with large businesses, and I would say that if the average citizen in the street should handle the situations exactly as been previously discussed. But if we're talking about businesses' response and what businesses can do at a greater level, it really depends on the type of business. If we're talking about hotel chains, we're talking about where you're actually going to be having the criminal activity occur. Things like education for front desk workers and providing them with the 800 numbers and the websites that they can report things to tell them that they have protections within their organization, that they're not going to be fired if they report that they thought a guest might be a human trafficking subject or victim. Because a lot of front desk employees are afraid of that if the guest makes a complaint, they're going to get fired. So protections for employees if they report. If you're talking about large chain gas stations like QT or Racetrack or any of those, a similar thing to report, a reporting mechanism for the frontline employees, the people that work the desk and take the money from customers every day. Another thing that is very helpful for us in investigations is for the places where trafficking occurs, like hotels, gas stations, those areas, to have really good surveillance camera systems that are accessible and can be retrieved by law enforcement. If a camera at a front desk of a hotel captures the trafficking victim with the trafficking subject when they check into the hotel, that's great evidence for us. And that's something that just changing how security sets the cameras up so they're pointed in a certain direction with that in mind, instead of theft or loss in mind, but with protecting the public in mind, those kind of little changes can help. And so it depends on the business. For technology companies, if you run a technology company or are a chief of security at a technology company, it's helpful to think about, if my app or if my new program that we're working on is leveraged by traffickers to commit crimes, how can I help preserve data for law enforcement if they give me legal process so that I can best preserve that data and get it to them in a timely fashion? What we see a lot of times is app companies will build an app, but the only thing that they think about is getting it to market and profits, which I understand from a business perspective. But after the fact, because of requirements in the United States, they end up having to build a legal department to answer the demand when those apps are used for illegal activity. And so in the development and with technology companies, to have a law enforcement response in mind as you're creating your next piece of technology would be extremely helpful to us. Because as Sergeant Britton said, our bad guys move very quickly. They jump from one app to another, and we're always trying to play catch up. And the next app that comes up and that's used by the general public, the companies that we deal with tend to be overwhelmed because they're not prepared for that law enforcement response to the fact that bad guys are using those apps, because apps grow so quickly. So every business, I think, if they did an internal audit and a look at their own business process and to look at how trafficking could actually occur within their business and how they could affect the crime problem, I think if they came up with a small unit like the Rotary Club has built with a task force, say, how do we address this? What can we do to help this problem or stop this problem? It's really business dependent. But there have been great success stories, like you mentioned, Delta putting together education programs for their frontline employees. And I think a lot of other businesses could use that model and leverage that to help with the crime problem.
Well, that's a great invitation to those of us from businesses to look at how we can create policies and procedures within our organizations to help in the fight. I can tell you, in the course of the business roundtable discussions that we've been assembling through Rotary, and the many discussions business leaders have been having through Rotary and otherwise, very much companies are wrestling with ways to weave into their policies and procedures and educational programs ways to do just this. It's sort of our efforts locally have been based sort of on an inside-outside game. Inside, let businesses develop roadmaps for their organizations, what makes sense for them, their employees, their customers, their vendors and suppliers, and how to fashion policies that work. On the outside game, it's how can businesses collectively send a message to a broader community that we're paying attention to this and we're looking at it. And even though the problem keeps morphing and growing in some ways, the effort to fight it and be aware of the problem is growing as well. I can speak from a business's perspective. It's one of the challenges you all have alluded to is how we want to do something. We want to sign on. We want to have these no-fault types of frontline people out there pointing out problems. But how do we do it? How do we do it without creating legal problems for businesses who start over-reporting? Is there a risk of over-reporting? Is there maybe that's not a concern? But I'll just start with you, Agent Kabrhel, since you kicked off the idea. Do you find that the legal departments of businesses get protective and vigilant in limiting what the businesses could otherwise do?
I think that depends on the business, and I think it depends on the lawyers are lawyers for a reason, right? And for the lawyers on the call and the meeting, I mean,
I'm one of them.
You guys get paid for a reason, right? And that's to protect the business and protect the brands. And we understand that from a law enforcement perspective. We do understand that is part of the world that we live in. Those changes, however, where I've seen them be successful within organizations, is when the top level executives understand the problem that's trying to be addressed and set a tone for the rest of the organization. And that helps to open up the ability for businesses to make changes in anything. We could be talking about anything, not just human trafficking.
Right.
So it's a high level buy-in from the executives that's going to make these changes happen. And it's just one of those things that it's a small piece of what the help law enforcement could use in this marketplace of trafficking. But to your point about over-reporting, I would say that there's never over-reporting, right? The general public is never going to be, for the most part, never going to be the expert in recognizing human trafficking. That's our job. And so if that report comes into the FBI or to the GBI or APD, it's going to find its way to the people who are experts at recognizing what that is. And I'd be happy to read over 5 reports a day and have none of them be actionable information, because in a week when I do 5 a day and I find one that's a true report, that's one that makes a difference in somebody's life. That trafficking victim needs help, and that's what we're here to do. So the over-reporting is a good problem to have, in my opinion.
And just by the way, I can tell you that in the efforts that Rotary has made to convene businesses locally, we did bring just that group of business leaders, CEOs, general counsels, the highest executives to set the tone for the organizations. Agent Green, tell us a little bit about what you're seeing at the state level in terms of business employees breaking policies and violating the law. Are you seeing people use the technology of businesses in illicit ways that violate the law in the sexual trafficking space?
I don't know so much about businesses in general with technology component. Now, I will go back to discussing some of the hotels that we have talked about earlier, or their surveillance footage, the lack thereof, or the cameras that are up that don't actually record or don't have any information. We've seen more just some of your hotel staff that kind of turn a blind eye or don't want to acknowledge what they think is going on or what they sometimes know that is going on. And therefore, they're not as apt to report that. Now, on the other end of that spectrum, we do have several hotels. I know we've provided training to hotel staffs, but to get everyone on board would be hugely beneficial in combating the trafficking issue that we're seeing.
Sergeant Britton, are you seeing work locally with businesses here in Atlanta be helpful in any respect? Is there anything that you'd like to see more of that we can do that's different from what we've been discussing?
No, as Agent Green said, specialists with us for the hotels. We unfortunately do have some hotels in the city that, and they're small, not the major chains, but some of the small independent-owned hotels have turned a blind eye to some of the activity that's taking place. However, once again, it goes back to us just going in and talking with people. We've walked through a hotel and just had the hotel staff or members of the staff say, "Hey, if you call me, I will tell you what's going on." So we've done that where we've just walked the area and they've given us information. So the awareness and reaching out and getting the word out is having a major effect, because even if the owners of some of these hotels don't want to provide us information, their staff and their employees do. So they're very much concerned and aware. Even when I go out in my personal, when I'm at gas stations and other places, and I see the hotline inside the gas stations or on the counter, I'm always like, okay, it's getting out there. So, and just only 5 years ago, this wouldn't have never took place. So to see the shift, to see the awareness, to see the attention, to see the people just looking and actually taking note of it is refreshing, and it's having an effect. So I applaud it to continue and see where it takes us.
Thank you. Shifting gears a little bit, and I'll start with Agent Kabrhel. Where are these victims coming from? Are they international? Are they domestic? Are they local? Are they from rural areas? Are they from inner city, poorer areas? Are they from middle class areas? Where are they from?
That's not a simple answer, because they can come and they do come from everywhere. And generally, though, if we're going to talk about the majority, what we see is our trafficking victims come from families where they don't have a stable family life. A lot of the victims of trafficking are foster kids that don't have a structured life that they can depend on for their future. And when a 16, 17, 18-year-old victim sees no prospects in their life, and they meet a person online who pretends to love them and says, "Come stay with me and I'll take care of you," they reach out for those people. And what ends up happening is when they go to meet them and travel to meet them, what they find is that they're actually meeting a trafficker who tells them that they have to work in commercial sex in order to receive that love or receive that attention or receive that comfort. And so those kids, for the most part, or young people for the most part, who don't have a structured family life that they can depend on, that's how they fall prey to it. There is a number of victims that we find that believe that they were answering an advertisement to be a Instagram model or to be in some kind of modeling, and they travel to Atlanta from another city, and when they get here with very little money, they end up not meeting someone to become a model, but fall into commercial sex trafficking. And unfortunately, that's where the bulk of the trafficking victims come from, is family lives that just aren't going to give them the prospects of success that they believe they can get somewhere else. We do see kids come from good families who just for whatever reason don't want to be with their families and end up thinking they're running away to a boyfriend and end up in a trafficking situation. But with those victims, they oftentimes can get out of the life easier because they have a family to go back to. Whereas victims with no family to go back to, or just foster care to go back to, or the system to go back to, so to speak, they end up falling back into that once law enforcement takes them and protects them. Our non-government organization partners, such as the Receiving Hope Center, that takes children, and the laws that were changed in Georgia, and they take children that are trafficking victims and allow them to, they can hold them for a certain period of time to allow them to decompress and allow them to get out of the life for a little while. Those changes that the governor's wife, First Lady, helped to bring about are huge for us in the trafficking of minors. Previous to those, the children would go right back into the DFAC system, right back in the foster care, and they'd run away almost immediately, right back where they were. So those partnerships we have on the state level, there's not a lot of states in the country that have that system set up the way it is. And part of what got those laws made and changed is the business community to show support for our political figures to help make those happen. So there's a little bit happening in all different areas of trafficking that helps us in law enforcement. So it's not just one place we can fix it. But for those trafficking victims, the lack of security at home is really the victims we see the most in our cases.
And Agent Green, is the pandemic having an impact on all of this?
I would say yes. Statistically speaking, so with GBI, with our Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, they receive tips that come in from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Those tips come in the form of what's called cyber tip line reports. And since the pandemic, there has been a huge increase in the amount of cyber tip line reports that have come to Georgia, just simply due to the fact that you've got more kids that are at home and that are on social media and they're on the internet. And that's where we have found in working these cases that a lot of these traffickers or exploiters are going to connect with these kids online. And because of things being shut down and people being stuck at home, they're hanging out on the internet basically all day long. And they're building these relationships with these traffickers whom they see as somebody that cares about them or loves them. To echo what Agent Kabrhel said, most of these victims, like he said, are not coming from the best home lives anyways. They're vulnerable for a reason. And the majority of them, statistics show, come from not only those broken homes, but they're homes where they're already experiencing sexual abuse in the home. If not sexual, then, physical abuse. But you have these victims that decide, I'm done. I can't take this. I can do better on my own. And they run, but they get out on the streets. And, our statistics say within 24 to 48 hours, if they haven't already been approached by an exploiter online, they'll be approached on the run. And they're kids. They think they can do better, but they get out there and they don't have a plan in place. And so they find themselves very easily in a trafficking situation.
And Sergeant Britton, are even though a lot more people are on the computer and online and on their phones right now, as there's some level of efforts to stay inside, people are still out on the streets. What's going on in the streets of Atlanta as far as these kids finding themselves either homeless or on their own or what have you?
Well, for the city of Atlanta, as you said, they are, for lack of a better term, especially the young kids, they are frustrated with being at home. So we have seen an uptick in our missing and runaway reported within the city. So, and some of those runaways are specifically due to the kids stating they're tired of staying at home. And to add to the statistics that some abuse, or most of the abuse, is starting at the home, a lot of the abusers are having more access to that child. So the child feels that I must run away because now I'm completely trapped. At least at one point, I at least could spend time in schools, spend time away with friends, and it wouldn't be as bad. But now we're all in a house together constantly, and I can't take it no more. So we are seeing an uptick of that, and we can attribute that primarily to the pandemic. So, and because of that, as I said, the old methods are still out there. So you still have people on the streets recruiting kids from the streets. We still have gangs getting deeply involved in human trafficking, recruiting that route. So yes, again, the pandemic has caused some issues.
Well, the final question I want to ask all three of you is, given the challenges, and there are significant challenges, and there are new innovations that the perpetrators are constantly employing, what do you want us to do from a business and civic community that you haven't already shared? I know that we can all look at our company policies, we can all open our eyes and pay attention and report. Is there any further assistance that we as citizens, we as business leaders can bring to you to make your job easier?
I'll start. I guess we talked about a lot of things that could help. I think that forums like this that educate the masses and the train the trainer, so to speak, that people involved in calls and forums like this can take that back to their businesses and spread the word, creates a spider web, so to speak, of just information growth and education growth in this field. And the more we get it out to the Atlanta Metro, the better. The one thing from a national perspective, because that's what the Bureau is always concerned about, is that it's not just Atlanta. Atlanta isn't where the trafficking starts and ends. We see a lot of trafficking come through Atlanta up to the East Coast. We see trafficking come from the Midwest and Texas into Atlanta. And to reach out to the rest of the business community outside of Atlanta to educate the rest of the organizations that you're partnered with, or even in your own organization, to say, hey, look, if you're in Houston, what are you guys doing there for human trafficking? And because that does affect Atlanta, maybe not directly, maybe not something you see every day, but it absolutely does. When we have large events in the city, such as when we had the Super Bowl, we were supposed to have the Final Four last year, but it got canceled. Every time we have a large event, the Bureau brings in a team and works with the Match Task Force, because we have traffickers bring victims in from all over the country, from as far as California, because they know that the dollars are in Atlanta at that time. And so we're not the only city that does big events. So to coordinate with your national partners to say, hey, when the next big event occurs in your city, what are you doing to help these victims that are being trafficked there? That, I think, would be a huge help to Atlanta, because if it stopped in another city, it never gets here.
Great. Thank you. Agent Green, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
I'm just going to reiterate, education is huge, and keeping the topic, ongoing. The more that we can talk about it, the more we can get it out there. I think it was Keith had said something earlier. we were talking about the problem, in Atlanta, you don't realize you have a problem until you start looking for the problem. And as he had hit on, that's one reason why they like to say we have so many trafficking cases, but it's because we're doing such a good job, both in the law enforcement world and I think on the education standpoint of getting it out there. So people that know, hey, this is what I need to look for. This is what I need to do if I feel like there's something wrong. Education is just huge. It is key in everything.
Thank you. Thank you. Sergeant Britton, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Yes. And one of the things I always like to stress that with the business leaders, with your workers, the education is great, but do not miss the opportunity to talk to your own children. Your kids, your children know more than you think. Because a lot of things are taking place in the high schools and the middle schools. They're aware of stuff that's happening on the internet. A lot of parents don't understand or don't at least, hey, just ask your child what's going on. More kids are being solicited than you think. So I always stress that it's not about, going to work and always focus on what's going on someplace else. If you have kids at home, especially teenagers, just talk to them, ask them. You will be very surprised on what they will be able to educate you on.
Well, I want to thank the three of you for being with us today. A few takeaways for me that I'd like to emphasize for this group is you talked about education, you talked about collaboration, you talked about reporting, you talked about finding ways for us as business leaders to implement policies and adopt new policies to help in the fight. That's what this group is all about. Earlier in the year, the Rotary Club of Atlanta came out with a book of about 30 some odd case studies of what different businesses and organizations are doing. And what we're doing is continuing the process of bringing awareness and education. The case studies and the information that different businesses are employing is also online on the Rotary website. But for me, the key is we've got to keep being your partners. We cannot look to you to do the work for us. You're overwhelmed. You got lots of problems. We got pandemic going on. We've got all kinds of disruptions going on in our society today, and we always do. So it is our job and on us, and that is why we wanted to host this panel. And I really appreciate you being here, because as much as we as business leaders talk about what we can do to educate our workforce and our communities and our kids, we're not the experts on what happens on the other side of the equation and how this is looking. So thank you very much for being with us. Thank all of you who are watching this and participating in this, and appreciate you giving your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
No, thanks for having us.